Hello everyone, and welcome to the second installment of my new video series, Warhammer Artifacts of Legend, where I do an in-depth lore examination of all the items possessed by one or more of Warhammer's most famous characters. Today we'll be looking at Prince Imrik of Caledor, last descendant of the House of Caledor and greatest living dragon prince. If you would like to make a suggestion for the character I cover next, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. These videos take a lot of research to make, so I may not cover your suggestions immediately, but it will affect which characters I research next. With that in mind, the items we will be discussing today are the Star Lance, a legendary weapon wielded by the ruling nobility of Caledor, the Armor of Caledor, the family's ancestral armor, and the Dragonhorn, an artifact capable of rousing any dragon from its slumber. All the information in today's video comes from the various High Elf army books, along with information provided in the Total War Warhammer series. Of those born of royal and precious blood, few can claim a more noble heritage than Prince Imrik of Caledor. While Princes Tyrion and Teclis may be descended from an Aryan, Imrik comes from the only other elven bloodline as greatly revered as that of the first Phoenix King. He is the blood of the Dragon Tamer. Known as Caledor Dragon Tamer, Imrik's ancestor was probably the greatest wizard the world has ever seen. He was the architect of the Vortex, and even now his restless spirit maintains its enchantments on the Isle of the Dead. It was he who forged the alliance with the great drakes of Ulthuan, and first trained Ulthuan's archmages. The Elven Kingdom of Caledor was named in his honor, and his descendants have ruled it since. From the strength and example of the Dragon Tamer, the ancient princes of Caledor also learned to tame and ride dragons as war mounts. But since Caledor himself, no elf has shown such a strong bond with Ulthuan's dragons until Imrik. It is also because of this strong bond that Imrik displays the fiery and often conflict-driven nature of his greatest sires. He is known as a man. Wait, no. Hold on, he's an elf of action, and has spent much of his life trying to reclaim the former glory of the elves, and more so the glory of the ancient dragon princes. The dragons of Ulthuan are the elves' oldest and greatest allies, whose strength has saved the elves from destruction many times. However, since the creation of the Vortex, magic within the world has diminished, and with it the dragons also. Many of the dragons now sleep almost indefinitely, and are unable to be roused by most of Caledor's dragon princes. And as a result, many of Caledor's nobility ride to war on horses instead of dragons. But not Imrik. Imrik can wake the dragons when no others can. His veins run with dragon fire, for he is master of dragons. The Star Lance is undoubtedly one of the strongest weapons in the possession of the High Elves. There are even legends surrounding it stating it is indestructible while the fires of its creation still burn within the volcano of Val's Anvil. Its point is so keen that the lance can pierce any armor. Truly, it is a weapon of a bygone era. The origins of the Star Lance date back to the time of Venarian, when the first and greatest of Ulthuan's magical weapons were forged in Val's Anvil by Caledor Dragon Tamer. It is unknown whether this weapon was wielded by Caledor Dragon Tamer himself, since he was more known to engage in battle with magic, but the 8th edition High Elf Army book stated this weapon was gifted to the nobles of Caledor for their unfailing courage. A likely candidate for its original owner, however, is the son of Caledor, Menieth. Very little is known of Menieth, but we do know that he had long fought together with his father and an Aryan during the Great Catastrophe. A fierce individual, he would later participate in the first council of princes that selected Belshazzar as the second Phoenix King, and was the only prince able to meet Marathi's glare and fury when her son Malekith was not chosen to succeed his father. Menieth would later die overseas while fighting in the wars of conquest and colonization that occurred after Chaos was first expelled from the world. The Star Lance would then be passed down to the House of Caledor, always being borne by true-born heroes in the service of every Phoenix King. As to the lance's construction, the point of this weapon was forged from the heart of a fallen star, an omen of no small importance in the Warhammer world. Meteors within Warhammer Fantasy usually are made entirely out of warpstone, but occasionally a meteor's heart is made out of an even rarer substance, Gromril. The Star Lance's point being made out of warpstone is entirely anathema to High Elf sensibilities, but the idea that the Star Lance is partially made out of Gromril is not a baseless theory. Star metal, or Gromril as it is called in the dwarf tongue of Khazalid, is an incredibly dense and hard metal, especially suited for being used with rune magic and runic weapons. It is usually mined from secret locations within the Dwarf Empire, but its origins are actually extraterrestrial. Gromril is in fact not a native element to the Warhammer world, and any found deep within the earth are actually the remnants of long-fallen stars. A meteor with the heart of Gromril falling to Ulthuan's landmass appears to be a singular event, as no other elven weapons are known to be forged from star metal. When it comes to forging items out of Gromril, the dwarfs are typically the only smiths capable of mastering the incredibly difficult material, but select individuals among other races have been known to be capable of harnessing this incredible metal. The Skaven made the Fellblade, and used this weapon to kill Nagash. This weapon was forged out of a mixture of stone Gromril and warpstone. Among the High Elves, however, there was only one craftsman whose incredible skill at forging and enchanting surpassed many of the dwarfs' greatest artisans, Caledor Dragontamer. Besides the Starlance, the best known examples of his craft are the Dragon Armor of Anarion and its paired twin, the Rune Sword Sunfang. These incredible items are among the most powerful artifacts ever forged, and have lost none of their potency over the millennia of their existence. We may look to some known information regarding their creation to perhaps reveal the background of the Starlance. Like those items, the Starlance was forged before the creation of the Vortex, when magic heavily saturated every part of the world. Those conditions meant that any magical items created in that time period, known as the Elder Days, have much stronger enchantments than if they were to be made today. Here are some thoughts from Tyrion, wielder of those two items. Forged in the depths of Val's anvil, quenched in the blood of the mightiest dragons of ancient times, and shaped with hammers touched by the smith god himself. Being shaped with godly artifacts by the greatest elven craftsman in history, in a known place of magical energy is impressive enough. But the blood of dragons is immensely powerful. Among other properties, dragon blood can cure the thirst of a vampire, and may contribute to a dragon's ability to breathe fire. This innate magical power would provide the catalyst for truly remarkable enchanted items. While the lance plate is likely made out of elven forged Gromril, the rest of the lance is not stated to be made out of a specific material. All that is said of the shaft is this. This weapon's graceful lines belie the formidable power it grants its wielder. Most likely, however, the shaft of the lance is made out of Ithilmar, meaning silver steel. Ithilmar is a unique metal only found around Val's Anvil, the volcano at the tail end of the Kingdom of Caledor. It is perhaps the greatest advantage the elves have after their mastery of magic. It is as hard and durable as the greatest steel, but at a fraction of the weight, allowing high elves to still utilize their incredible speed and agility, even while wearing heavy armor. A magical metal for a magical people. The Starlance is truly a weapon worthy of its legends. If you are enjoying the video so far, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more Warhammer and Total War content. But no matter what, thank you very much for checking this video out. In older editions of Warhammer Fantasy, the Armor of Caledor is said to be an ancient heirloom, having been used for well over 4,000 years by the Masters of the House of Caledor. However, in the 8th edition High Elves Army book, the Armor of Caledor is stated to be not a single suit, rather it is an amalgam of components gathered across the millennia. Every piece of the Armor of Caledor has been taken from the recovered fragments of now-lost armor that was once worn by a mighty Caledorian hero. I think that this may be true in part, but in my opinion the main reason it was stated to have been worn by many who were not the ruling Prince of Caledor was that Imrik was not included in 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy. So let's go with the presupposition that the armor is indeed an heirloom only worn by the Masters of Caledor, but that it is made up of different suits of armor. Talking about the time frame of its likely first incarnation, we look to that statement of being over 4,000 years old. Going by that date, it would put the armor's original era of creation sometime around the start of the Elven Civil War, known as the Sundering. If that's the case, then its original owner would most likely be either Caledor the Conqueror, the third Phoenix King, or his older brother Caladrian, who was killed at the shrine of Asurien by the traitor Malekith. Caledor the Conqueror was selected as the new Phoenix King after the assassination of Belshazzar, and would go on to successfully defeat Malekith and the Dark Elves during the Sundering. He would continue to battle them for over 100 years after the war's domestic conclusion. His fight against the Druki would come to a tragic end, however, as after his fleet had fought Dark Elf ships in naval skirmishes, his ship was separated and overwhelmed by Dark Elf corsairs. Rather than be captured and meet a horrible death of torture and mutilation at Dark Elf hands, Caledor jumped overboard in his full suit of armor, drowning even as he sank to the depths. Because of this heroic death, I find it highly unlikely his body, and thus his armor, were ever recovered by the High Elves. Maybe part of the armor eventually found its way to Ulthuan's shores, helping to explain why the Armor of Caledor is made up of different sets of armor, but like I said, I think that's an unlikely scenario. Total War Warhammer 2, however, lays out a possible scenario that at least in part would explain that the armor did in fact belong to Caledor the First. Imrik's quest for the Armor of Caledor leads him against a blood dragon vampire who had recovered a gauntlet of Caledor's armor. This vampire also led Vampire Coast undead, which may have played a part in the gauntlet's recovery.
So it is true! The blood dragon dons the lost heirloom of my bloodline. His minions may be many, but when he falls, his control will crumble, along with his shambling minions.
I think the most likely scenario is that the Armor of Caledor is a combination of the Armor of Caledor, who was the master of the House of Caledor before his murder, with pieces of Caledor the Conqueror's armor that were reclaimed by the High Elves, later being added as a tribute to the fallen Phoenix King. The Armor of Caledor is what is known as dragon armor, meaning it is Ithamar forged at Val's anvil, making it both incredibly strong and practically immune to fire. Now, resistance or complete immunity to all flaming attacks depended on the edition of Warhammer Fantasy, but in most this even included an immunity to dragonfire. This secondary attribute is most likely a combination of magical enchantments incorporated by the Smith Priests of Val, and the addition of dragonfire as a part of the forging process. On tabletop, the armor had a +2 armor save, meaning it was among the strongest armors available to any race, only surpassed by the dragon armor of Anarion worn by Tyrion. It also provided a ward save, meaning that it most likely had some sort of magical enchantments to ward away lesser blows. Along with those enchantments, the Total War Warhammer version of this legendary artifact can also slowly heal the wearer and restore them from fatigue. Although Imrik is known for his nobility and ferocity in battle, his most precious and scarce talents are those of his relationship with Ulthuan's dragons, for he is dragonkin. He has the ability to awaken and bind dragons to his will, many awakening for him when they would not do so for another elf. In this endeavor, he is aided by perhaps his most important item, the Dragonhorn. Among the many precious artifacts which bear importance to both the elves and the dragons of Ulthuan, none are greater than the Dragonhorn. This ancient heirloom of the House of Caledor is actually primarily the result of the elusive magic of the dragons, and less the skill of the elves. The Dragonhorn has many incredible effects. When Imrik sounds this magical horn, its clarion call affects all who hear it.
Might of the volcano!
For the elves of Ulthuan, it fills them with pride, their hearts rising to meet any challenge. To the dragons, however, it is an irresistible awakening that none can ignore. They emerge from their slumber, ready to do battle once more. As to when and where the Dragonhorn originates, the 6th edition Army Book states, "This warhorn was made from the horn of an ancient dragon, gifted to Imrik's distant ancestors in the Elder Days. The dying Drake summoned all of his remaining power to enchant his remaining, unbroken horn, as he lay bleeding in the aftermath of the Battle of the Glade of Tears." The Elder Days, as discussed before, refer to the times of Chaos's first entrance into the world. But I am not familiar with the so-called Battle of the Glade of Tears. But this reference of the Elder Days would place the creation of the Horn sometime in the 90-year period between Anarion's ascension and the creation of the vortex that would signal the end of the Elder Days. The description for this item in Total War Warhammer provides some additional information to the origin of the Dragonhorn, saying, "A single blast on the Dragonhorn, forged in the fire of Draupnir's flaming breath, causes the foe to shrink in terror, for they know what surely follows." Draupnir is supposedly the ancient father of all dragons, whose skeleton forms the landmass of Ulthuan, but I think this is a typo and refers to Indraupnir, the dragon of Anarion. Indraupnir was said to be the most ancient of Ulthuan's dragons, and the son of Draupnir. I think both of these quotes combined likely means that the horn was enchanted by the dying dragon, but then forged with the combined effort of the elves and dragonfire from Indraupnir. I don't know about you guys, but I think Imrik is such a cool character. He's the last true dragon prince, but he is unwilling to let that legacy become only history. But by his will, the dragons will rise to reclaim their glory and meet the foes of the High Elves on the field of battle. With all that said, I'm Fohammer, and have a great day, guys.